Hello everyone and welcome to another episode. Today we're going to discuss how to create the best support system that you need for your large model pieces so you can have better gaps when you're putting them together and assembling your final model. This is really important for those of us that like to build big pieces instead of just minis because then, you need to be able to think about how those keys are going to fit, how well they're going to join, what the gap looks like between the two parts, because you guys don't necessarily want seams to show on your final painted product. So in today's episode, I'm going to show you the how I do that, and we're also going to be utilizing grid supports to do that with Lychee's new grid system. And I'll explain how that might actually help you especially moving forward, because some of the supporting I do is on the grid, some of it is not on the grid. And there's a reason for that, because sometimes I just need things to be a little tighter. And the grid support stuff is really good for broad or long pieces, legs, arms, things like that. Some body parts, torso, bottom pieces, that sort of thing. Where I don't tend to use it is I don't tend to use it on bases, things like that. I tend to use just, perimeter supporting on that. But we're not going to talk about that today. Today we're going to discuss how to get the best gaps you can get for your pieces. And the way to do that is to support the perimeter on where the joins are going to be as good as possible. Or you could have the perimeter join area face away from the supports entirely, that just means you're going to have to sand the places where the supports contacted the model, because you're going to have it the other way around, which normally what I do is I will support the contact point, and then I will take the contact point area and I'll just sand that down a little bit, because that's to me, that's easier than having to sand off the supports off the actual model. Anyway, without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so here we are looking at some of the pieces for the Viking Maiden, which is brand new print that I'm just finished doing the test work for digital dark pinups. And this was one of the build plates here that we had laid out. And just to show you what I'm talking about, how I this is on grid, leg, all snap to grid, head, not quite so much. Only because these are kind of clustered in here. Some of this is on grid, but some of this is not. These are all very light supports in there, by the way, to support this daintily, because the pigtails here are a little bit more delicate, as are the little tips on the hair. Again, leg, grid. That's a weird set of supports there that it made, but it worked out just fine. And this was just it doing its bracing automatically there. It works, though. It does work. It forms like a bit of a weird pillar, because some of these fuse together, but it does work. It's a nice, strong support structure there. I don't know if that was what it intended to do, or if that was a bug with that particular part, but that's how it worked out. There's the axe. Some of this is using some grid. You can see some of the snap to grid there. Some of this is lined up, and then other parts I kind of went off the grid just because it's, again, smaller parts I will tend to not use the grid supports as much. Bigger parts I will tend to go into the grid support, because it is helpful. It will help recover prints. Like if some of it fails, the grid can actually help recover. So these are working pretty well. But anyway, I didn't come here to show you guys stuff that I already supported. We're going to go ahead and grab a part that I haven't already supported, and I'm going to show you how to work this out, so you get the best gaps possible when you're doing your joins. So let's take, for example, we'll start with the arm with the shield. Now, this is okay as far as however you want to orient this. Obviously, you want to lift it off the plate always. For this particular one, the way I oriented it was kind of like I did, almost like a base, but at a slightly higher angle here, to give the arm contact here with this flat surface. And then usually what I will do is I will down. It's funny, I used to use the line triangle raft a lot. I'm now actually going for the shape wall. And then we're going to go to our supports. And the way I start this is I turn my structure, and I'm going to turn the grid on at first. And then we're going to go over to our manual supports. And we're going to do a support projection on this one, because it's a nice flat area. So we're going to project, crease, and then I'm going to go there and there, and then there. Yeah. Okay. And then we're going to go to preview. And then we're going to go and choose our setting is going to be medium on this one. Interval's fine, and then we'll just go ahead and have that. Now, what I like about this, especially when you're doing the preview mode, is you can create a nice perimeter border, and then you will see now this is how the grid works. They're lined up very evenly. So if you are a crazy OCD person like me, you like all your supports to be neat when you're really trying. Sometimes I don't. I mean, you guys have seen some of my work. It's not always the prettiest support work, but it does get the job done and it does work. Some people do like to have prettier looking support work. They prefer that. This is definitely on the side of like elegance. Very nice the way that these are created. You see these little trees. Each one of them have like their root system, and then you have the top areas which are doing their supporting. Now, what I love about this is it saves you some space on resin, because you're not actually putting a bar down for every one of those tips. And for an object like this, it's pretty light. You don't really need that many. And then the last thing I would do here is I would go ahead and go to my manual tab again, and then you're just going to go to oh no, I'm sorry. We're going to go to structure. Sorry, I'm so used to it being under manual, they've moved it. And then we're going to go to small, strong object, and we're going to click update bracing. And now it's going to add that bracing. Now, all I really want to do at this point is I'm going to check islands on this part and then do my layer validations. But we're not going to go over all of that. I'm going to go over a couple different parts to show you all different ways you can do this. So that's how I would start tackling the shield. Now again, you got a lot more steps there, but that's a starting point. So now let's just say we're looking at the normal arm with the axe. This is a pretty simple part. So the orientation method I would use here to give you the best orientation possible is you're going to want to kind of balance it almost the way it is right there, the way this is facing. This does give you some support damage here and here, but if I were to turn it upside down, or even if I were to try to line it up like this, I would get all of this would be support damage versus just doing that way. So yeah, you're going to get this support damage some, but you can use lights or mediums on that. You can just use a decent amount of them, and that will give you a good orientation to start with. So again, we're going to go to prepare. We'll put our raft on there, and then we're going to go over to our support. Now, I'm not going to use support projection for this because this is definitely not the type of part for it. And I also only used grid partially on this one. So just for areas like here where I was doing the axe head. So here, this area, I would definitely use the support grid because it's going to help you keep this area organized. And I think that's important, especially when you're in a tight area like that. But some might also disagree with me because I did say if this part's too small, I don't usually use grid. And like I said, I kind of go flip-flop back and forth. So that is about all I would probably use the grid system for here. And I would go ahead and just, here, let's see if we can. Yeah, we'll add some bracings there, and that should actually be pretty good for that section. And then maybe the only other area I might stick on the grid is going to be when I'm working down the shaft of the axe there. We'll go ahead and also update that. And there, that looks pretty. So that's a pretty good start to, and you can see it does like to build these little sets of supports like that. So I imagine the other ones probably got created when I automatically updated some section, and It just created a giant cluster of supports. But these are not a problem. They will actually work fine. They're all at a good angle. So all of that's good. And you should be good there. Now, as far as the structure goes, I'm going to go ahead and turn that off now. And then we're going to look down here at the bottom and just see where our print starts, which is going to be right here at the corner, as you can see. And I'm going to place one heavy support there. And then I'm going to look for where this starts. I'm going to place a heavy support there. Again, there at the edge, there, and there at the top of that part of the arm. Then we're going to go back to my mediums. And we're going to put a couple more supports on the key, because this is one of the more important parts to making sure that you have good gap fitting, is your keys need to be good. So you don't necessarily care if you got to shave a couple bits off of them, but you do want to make sure that the key is intact and the right shape. That is the first key, not to be punny, to making sure that you have a good gap. The other key to it is making sure that this area here, which is what we call the contact point, is flat. Like, you don't want this to get tons of damage done to it, but you also want to use it as a form of support. So you want to make sure that you use the right type of support here and not over supporting it. So again, you could use the grid structure, but it's too tight. You see how tight of a space this is? And, again, I mean, I guess you could argue that it saves you space because it's using less bars. The problem here is that this is so early on with the print that I don't want less bars, I want more bars. Later on at the top of the print, we can use a little less because we don't need the weight support at the top as much as we need it at the bottom, because we need to support the mass that the print is starting with, not what it's ending with. I mean, you need to support both, but if this root system is here and it's nice and strong, you're good. You won't need much else. And then, of course, support your islands and your perimeters, like the yellow zones here. So what I would simply do for that is I would just paint the perimeter there using the medium supports, which are pretty light. And then we'll add some supports in here on the sleeve area. And then I will go ahead and just do a little paint magic here. And I like to use the support painter. It's fun. It gets your job done faster. And it's really not a problem. You can use it on all kinds of surfaces. Just make sure you set your intervals the way you want them on your support painting, and you're good to go. Again, we're still going to need to check for islands on this part and stuff like that, but for the most part, this is a great starting point, both orientation and support setup, to give you a really tight gap when you close this gap on that arm. Let's go ahead and take a look at a couple more pieces before we totally run out of time looking at an arm. So now, obviously, one of the more common pieces on a giant character is going to be things like the legs and the head. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of the legs, because the legs are one of the bigger pieces, and I think these are important too. You want to make sure this contact point is smooth, especially this one, because this one doesn't have anything to give you any gapping. Like, there's no piece of clothing, a belt, a strap, anything. Now, if we look at the other leg, you'll see here, let me move this out of the way, there's a belt. So this leg will have some level of forgiveness, because even if there's a little bit of a shadow, well, the belt's there, so you have some sort of an excuse. This leg is supposed to be skin on skin. So you really need to make sure that this leg has a good contact area and not something that's going to look funky. All right, so again, you're going to want to do your raft. This is a good orientation for this object for 3 reasons. 1, the fur is facing in a good direction for this not to create too many islands in the wrong direction. The heel is facing up, and the key is this bottom key is facing away, which means this will take no damage. So the key will fit nice and snug on the base, which is important because the figure itself is going to be big and very heavy once it's completely assembled. So you want to make sure that their foot keys are some of the most grounded, and that's why this key, as you can see, is a bit longer than the other one. It's thinner, but it's longer. And then, of course, you can always put glue on the foot itself, which will give you some added stability when you glue this down. But we're starting from this angle because this gives me the best way to drain it using drain holes. If we were to do it upside down from the foot, also that would also give me all these islands for the fur. But it wouldn't be as easy for me to figure out the drain holes. This was a much better way to do it for the draining. So for this particular one, we're going to turn on the grid because as you all saw, I did actually do the legs with the grid system. So I'm going to start with heavies on the bottom. And we're going to just place a couple heavies there. And we're going to place a couple on the other side. Now, the reason I'm doing it like this is because this is the starting point of this print. So this is a very important area. And it is very important that you catch this material and it comes out nice and smooth. Because if it doesn't come out nice and smooth, you are going to have a wavy body gap, which means you're going to be spending some time sanding. And so, yeah, you can even come in here and add some additional mini supports in there, kind of connect the dots a little bit, make it a little tighter angle. And this will give you a little bit added protection. If you add a couple minis, that gives you a see. And we see we've got a couple dots there. A couple more. And so now we're pretty solid. This should be a pretty solid piece as it forms. Let's go ahead and bring this up a little. And we can see here where this is going to form. So go ahead and take a look here at the bottom and we'll see, okay, so I'm also going to want that to be heavy. And I'm going to actually put a full row of heavies right there using the grid. Boom. And now you have that whole front perimeter is nice and supported. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add a couple minis in here because it's got some gaps. And you want to make sure your perimeter is really well guided. So, because this is the resin, when it starts to cure, it's got like a floppiness to it. No. So you want to make sure that when the print is starting, or parts of the print are starting, you want to make sure that it has adequate support going on for the area so the material doesn't sag or warp. So now let's take a look. And you can see now we have far less gaps. The gaps are really small. And you could go in there and add multiple minis if you wanted to, but that might be overkill just for the key. And then that goes up. We have all that. So now we can switch back to our medium supports, which we did for the minis. And we can finish off supporting this key. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the perimeter with mediums. And that should be enough to make this work. And there we go. There's your key supported. And then we'll move over to the leg itself. And I'm going to just paint this on. Oop. A little off track there. Okay, so there's your loose perimeter. You can always go and refine that a little bit, but I like to painting it on, in my opinion, saves me a little time, and so I don't mind doing it and then kind of like cleaning it up later. Again, we're going to move up the leg. Again, just doing a perimeter area around the yellow zones because those are the zones that are going to be at the most pressure. That's going to be the most pull right there. And so you really want to make sure that you've got an adequate amount of supports there. I'll even make use of some inline creation just to kind of like box that in. And then I'm just going to go here, go back to my structure menu, and we'll say, for this one, I'm going to say, we'll keep it small, strong object. That's good enough. So go ahead and add update. And that's going to, I didn't have the grid turned on that whole time. Actually does look like it's lined with the grid anyway, though. Let me see. Oh, no, I did. So there we go. There's our there's our starting structure. Now, as you saw the legs, I had them pretty robustly supported because I had supports going all the way up and down the sides. It's honestly, I was actually amazed at how little support damage there was. I'm going to have to do a future follow-up video and show y'all one of the examples of this. I thought it was going to be far worse because it feels like there's a lot of supports on here. And then when I pull them up, and they literally just pull right off, and most of these tips just come right off, leaving no damage and barely any finishing left whatsoever. And the key itself was awesome. I mean, with this kind of perimeter support, you should have no problems with your key because your perimeter is going to be nice and smooth. And you're going to have a nice, good outline there where it's supposed to be printed. And that is going to be the most important fundamental rule when you want good gaps. Because if you're working on a giant model piece, that's a couple inches tall, you need to make sure 100% that you are supporting the perimeters around the edges, the contact points, and the gap where the gaps are going to be. Because otherwise, this is just going to be a nightmare. Now, you can go ahead and add some infill supports in the middle here. We can turn this to contact. I can see a little better. So this will give you a little bit more added stability on the part. And again, these are all mediums that I'm using, so very light on density. And then we'll go ahead and just add another row there. And that should actually be enough. And I'm just going to update the grid structure again for the bracings. And now from here, obviously, again, you want to validate, check your islands, go layer by layer, do your validations, bring it into UV tools, however you finish up your files. But this is the starting point that you want to take for a body part in this orientation. Now, if the leg was facing like straight up, like it was just straight, like from thigh to heel, I would just have it facing from the thigh upwards towards the foot. You usually want to start with the wider part first at an angle, and then work your way up to the more narrow parts. And obviously, don't forget to support the areas up here that are part of the foot that you still need to make sure that you maintain, because you obviously don't want those to fail. And for those, since they're a little bit taller, you can actually come down here and we can change this to tall object. And you see the difference. It does create larger, more spread apart bracings, so there is a difference there. And that's how I would do the legs in that kind of situation. I think we got time for at least a part or two more, so I'm going to try and go over a couple more things and show you all as much as I can. The head's probably a good part. I'm sure everyone's curious to know my formula for that one. But really, heads, in my opinion, are very similar to working on a miniature. They're really detailed. They're usually pretty small. Usually, I can even go an auto support route with this one because they're so small. They're so low mass. Usually, not a lot of material to them either. Now, this was a pretty bulky head. And the reason I'm laying it down like this is because I was never too concerned with this part. My concern is always the face, the ear, things like hair and effects that are in the front. So I always will lay the head backwards like this. And you can see there's even a little bit of weird polygonal issue back there, but that's just part of the model. Not really important, to be honest, because it sits on top of the body so closely that I think that actually contacts part of the body. So that might actually just be a keying thing. So down here is where you really want to start. Now, some folks might say the best orientation for this would be a little bit more like that. But I don't like that because you've got so much time between here and here on the print. I would much rather this key be closer to Earth. But you do you. Some folks would tell me to do it like this, but I don't like that either because then that's putting all the supports on the textured part of the top of the hair, which looks really nice, so I don't really want to ruin it by adding a bunch of supports to it. So instead, I opted for this method, which is it takes up a little bit more room, a lot more room, But I think the end result is a much easier print to manage and post-process. So there we go, is the kind of like the triangle shape you saw in my demo there. So then again, we're going to go to heavy first. And I'm going to just do this because this is honestly the best way to start. Just do an island search because it'll tell me all the islands that I need to start with, because this kind of object is so textured that there are just so many islands everywhere. It does become a bit challenging to just kind of eyeball it up. So you want the software's help on that. And as you can see, look, there's a lot. So now here's my rule. We also need to do this, and I forgot to. We need to tilt it a little that way, because we don't want that surface to be flat. So hold on, let me just do that one more time. There's still going to be like 100 and some islands, but that's not going to work. So now for the head, I did not use the grid support system. I just went ahead and I used the bracings. I'll always use the auto bracings because it's so much faster than me making the bracings myself. And honestly, I don't feel like there's really any difference. So I'll go to structure here, make sure it's off, snap to grid is off, and we'll go back over to manual. And now I'm going to put heavies where they count. I'm going to put them here. I'm going to put one here, 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 and I think that I might do a couple mini heavies in here, only because this hair, a little too close to the ear maybe. No, I can't. I don't think I can do that there. I'm going to have to figure out something else. Mini, that one worked. Yeah, see, there's even this little bit under the ear here. That again, I wouldn't trust just a light miniature support. I'd want something a little more dense. It doesn't. Now it's not. Yeah, no, that didn't quite hit it. Really does not want anything there. It's very close. I was hoping I could add a little. Oh, okay, there we go. We'll leave it at that. That seems to be just far enough away. As you can see, sometimes the island supports are tricky to get where you want them. And so then for the rest of this, we're going to go ahead and just take our manuals and then go over to medium. And then we would just finish the rest of these islands, which I can just quickly round out here. And you can do this on a grid if you want to, but the reason I'm not is because I don't want to be restricted. And an object like this does need a bit of toughness. Oh, it switched back to heavy on me. What the heck happened? Hang on. That's odd. I'm going to have to look back at that recording and see if I didn't change it or if it changed back. You guys tell me in the comments. Pretty sure I changed it. Anyway, we're going to go through the islands. There's 82 altogether. And I will show you the preliminary support work on the head. Again, the most important part being the key on the bottom. As long as that's supported well enough, your gap will be great, along with the neck. This one, I managed to get a really close neck seam, which made me very happy. Because she's not wearing any jewelry or necklace or anything like that. And so sometimes the characters will have nothing between their neck and their body. And it's just up to you to kind of like do your best to make sure that the neck seam doesn't look obvious. because obviously humans don't have a seam between their body and their neck. Now I get lucky every once in a while, and some of the big models, their heads will be attached and they won't be separate seams, but that's not very usual. Not extremely common. So yeah, don't count on that. 30 more islands left. And we're going to wrap this up here in a little bit because I think y'all probably get the idea of what I'm showing you. The general rule is going to be support your islands like you always do. Make sure your orientation is in the right place, because even though it seems silly to put the orientation on the keys and on the contact points, what I'm telling you is that essentially if you perimeter support them well enough, you will have a perfect connection and a perfect contact point. You're going to have good keys and it's going to work out just fine. But it's important to note that there are some things you need to, just note. Like you got to look at, okay, did I do my perimeter? Am I supporting, everything properly? Did I miss any islands? Go back through. And see what you might have missed. Don't forget to use my trick by going, layer to layer, stuff like that. And of course, when you're done here, you can still go here and you can say, use your bracings. You don't have to be on the grid to use the bracings. The auto bracings still work really great. And that's pretty much where I would start with with a piece like the head or something like that. Let me know in the comments if you guys want to see more body part demonstrations, different stuff like this, different pieces. I'm also planning on doing a following up where we're going to do a demonstration on actual part finishing and gap filling, and I even have a new product that I can show you guys for that. So yeah, that'll be fun and coming up in the next episode or so. Anyway, that is pretty much it for this episode anyway, without going on forever and ever. I hope that you guys enjoyed some of the demonstration of how I set up some of the supports on big body parts like that. Now we're talking big figurines. I'm talking, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 inches or taller. In most cases, most of the ones I think we do, even if they're only 13 centimeters tall, they're very wide and the scale is large. So most of these we're talking big. They're not minis at all. I mean, I love the name. We've always loved the name Print My Mini, but I always tell people we make more than just minis. We make some very large figures as well, which are some of my favorite ones. They're huge. They carry a lot of detail. We have a few companies that we work with, artists that we work with, that make a lot of really cool large ones. One of my favorites isn't one that we're merchants for, but I love their prints. Witchsong Miniatures. Hyper detailed, very big prints, very fun to make. We've showcased a few of their pieces doing some tutorial videos before, so I'm sure y'all have seen them before, and if not, check them out on my mini factory. And also, don't forget to check out Digital Dark Pinups on Colts, Gumroad, Patreon. Please support them. They are a fantastic artist and make a lot of really cool models. Every month, 2 new models come out on their Patreon channel. And you also get a welcome pack for joining. And there's all different variants and tiers available. So do check them out. They're very, very, very cool artists I've had the pleasure of working with for quite a while now. So check them out for sure. And definitely check out more of us. We've got our fully supported episodes that teach you pretty much everything from basics to really advanced techniques. We've got a lot of painting videos, and we've got a lot of other tutorials coming, and tons of material I'm working on for the rest of the year. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again very, very soon.